As the credits fade, I just want to thank you all so much for being here. We are really, really excited to have you here for this incredibly special edition of Women in Film Speaker Series. We are so excited to have you joining us here on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you're watching, as we bring you Black Muslim women, media makers, and industry changers. Joining us today are the incredibly talented Nigella Mukmin, Daria, Samir Lukman Harris, and Amina Bakir Abdul-Jabbar, a powerful panel of creative and brilliant filmmakers to talk about the intersection of identity and craft, the business of authentic storytelling, and filmmaking as a force for culture change. I'm Ebony Adams, the manager of public programs here at Women in Film. I'd like to let you know that today's event would not have been possible without the partnership of the fantastic people at the Muslim Public Affairs Council. And I count it as one of the few highlights of 2020 that I got to know and befriend the wonderful Sue Abedi, the director of Impact's Hollywood Bureau this year. Since the Bureau was launched in 2011, Sue has blended her love of her faith with her love of film, television, and digital series to change and expand the narrative of Islam and Muslims in the entertainment industry. She is committed, fiercely committed, to expanding the pool of Muslim talent in Hollywood by nurturing and connecting them to those who can assist with their careers, both on the creative and business sides of the industry. Everyone, please welcome Sue Abedi, who will share some opening remarks before introducing our amazing, brilliant moderator, Professor Amina Bakir Abdul-Jabbar. Note, our panelists will be taking your questions, so please post them throughout the conversation using the Q&A window at the bottom of your screen, your Zoom screen. And now I turn it over to Sue.
Thank you, Ebony, and right back at you. Your friendship and collaboration has been the highlight of 2020. It's been amazing. Thank you, Women in Film, the team of Women in Film, and the City of West Hollywood's Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission. My name is Sue Abedi, and I am the director of the Hollywood Bureau at the Muslim Public Affairs Council, MPAC for short. MPAC changes the narrative of Muslims in the entertainment industry so that audiences see Muslims as vital contributors to creating social and cultural change in America and around the world. When speaking to industry decision makers and creatives, we're often asked, what stories are missing on TV and film when it comes to the Muslim community? The answer is usually authentic Black Muslim narratives in general and narratives around Black Muslim women in particular. Black Muslims make up over 20% of the American Muslim population, and yet, unfortunately, these narratives have been marginalized within the Muslim community and in the entertainment industry. Audiences are hungry for justice, representation, and stories told through voices we all need to hear. And this is why we are so excited to be hosting today's panel. Malcolm X once said, "The media is the most powerful entity on earth, and it will have you hating the people being oppressed and loving the people doing the oppressing, making the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent." With that, and before I introduce Professor Amina, I want to implore all of you who are eligible to vote in the upcoming elections to do so as soon as possible. The America we deserve is counting on it. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Professor Amina Bakir Abdul-Jabbar. Professor Amina is an activist, a writer, a producer, a director, and a professor in the Pan-African Studies Department at Cal State LA. Professor Amina is currently in development on a TV series that is loosely based on her life. Please welcome Professor Amina Bakir Abdul-Jabbar.
Thank you, Sue. I'm excited to be here.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum to everybody out there, and peace to everyone. I want to first say thank you to the Muslim Public Affairs Council, Women in Film, which I have great respect for Women in Film, and the City of West Hollywood Public Affairs Council, and the audience for joining us today. I'm excited to be here. We have a powerful group of Black Muslim women. This is the dream panel for me. This is something as a professor I've tried to put up a couple of times at Cal State LA, where I'm a professor. And so it's exciting to actually get this done right now on in a pandemic on Zoom. But I think the conversation today will transform and elevate you out of your what's normal Zoom conversations. First, I want to introduce Samir Lukman Harris, who is an LA-based screenwriter and playwright, as well as an actor. She can be seen in TV shows like Good Wife, HBO's Room 104, and Sharp Objects. She also starred opposite Sterling K. Brown in Susan Laurie Park's Father Come Home from Wars. She is a writer as well, and her first full-length play, Rapture, is doing very well and garnering much recognition in notable festivals for new plays. For instance, the Austin Film Festival, where it did very well in the 2020 competition. She is also a graduate of the University of Wisconsin and Madison with a degree in cultural anthropology. So I want to welcome Samir Lukman Harris. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
Next is Nigella Mukmin, who is a writer, filmmaker who hails from East Bay. She holds a degree from Cal Arts in directing and writing. Her work is informed by poetry, photography, fiction, and dance. And you can see all of that influence in her beautiful debut, feature film debut, Jen, where she won a special jury award for the screenplay from the South by Southwest Film Festival. She has written for TV shows like Swagger and the upcoming Blind Spotting, as well as directed episodes of Queen Sugar and Insecure. And she's currently developing her next feature film, Moosewoods Park. Welcome, Nigella Mukmin. Nigella, are you from East Bay? Where are you from exactly? Oh, where are you from exactly?
I'm from Lukman.
Okay. I might have. Okay, I want to make sure I got that right. And then finally, Mona Daria. I might be saying your name wrong, so when you come on, you correct me and I will feel nothing about that. So I said, Oakland represent, that's a shout out to you, Nigella. So Mona Daria, who's a writer, director, and currently a candidate for a master's degree in film and television at Mount St. Mary's. She works as a Muslim consultant on season 2 of Coroner, and also co-hosted the 2019 North Hollywood Film Awards. When she is not writing or directing, she's workshopping her jokes on stage for an upcoming feature, which is loosely based on characters in her own family. So let's welcome Mona Daria. Mona, am I saying your name right?
It's Muna.
Muna.
Yes.
And how do I say the last name?
Daria.
Daria, okay. I want to get that.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. So usually the first question, we all know it well, is always like, how did you get started? How did you get into this industry? But I think what I want to ask, just to change it up a little bit, is, what are some of the images that you saw of Black women or Muslims, or I'm sure you didn't see too many of Black Muslims, but what are some of the images that you saw that maybe influenced you to start in this business? Or was it Black? What inspired you in terms of images or, things you saw and you were like, I definitely want to work against that narrative? So we can start with Samira.
I think probably, the image that first comes to mind about an image that was positive, that that allowed me to launch into acting and being creative, was Malcolm X, obviously, because I'd never seen anyone like me being represented. But I think when I finally became an actor, I've never, not once in 20 years that I've been an actor, ever auditioned for a Muslim character. So I know there's a lack there, and that gives me fuel and drive to continue to make that representation on screen more apparent. I'm just starting to dive into behind the scenes work, but I think putting more faces out there is vital.
I think Sue opened up from Impact with a quote from Malcolm X, and I think this is maybe another part to insert a quote from him, and we've heard it quite a bit in the last 6 months to a year, but the most disrespected person is the Malcolm X quote about the most disrespected person is a Black woman. So I don't know if that speaks to what you're talking about, but I think there's something about the way we think of ourselves as being Black Muslims, and Black Muslims how we can work with that powerful quote, work against, you know, the narrative of us, of Black women in general. Nigella, how about you?
Yeah, I would definitely say growing up, going to see Malcolm X in a movie theater at Grand Lake Theater in Oakland really impacted me. I had never seen people respond to a movie in that way. It was just a packed theater, lots of Black people, lots of Black Muslims, and just the call and response that I witnessed from, you know, Denzel's performance, and just the pride and the love toward that film and toward Malcolm X and toward that, you know, just the experience, I think showed me that I wanted to have that type of impact on people through art. But at that time, when I was that age, I think I was maybe 10, I didn't know that I wanted to be a filmmaker. I just knew that I wanted to impact people in that way, and have people feel like they're being seen in a way. And I feel like that was one of the movies that helped me to feel seen. I remember watching like Love and Basketball. That was a movie that helped me to feel seen, just to see, you know, a Black girl just living life, trying to figure out, you know, love and family issues. And there was a lot of stuff I watched that I didn't relate to, you know, where there seemed to be no internal life to Black women and girls in TV and film. And I knew it was supposed to be speaking to me, but I didn't relate to it at all. So I think I found my voice really through writing and through reading novels and writing poetry as a way to just find myself artistically.
You know, I saw that in your film, Jen. I noticed like what you said was missing from the film world or film and television world. I noticed we get to see the inside. We get to see that in Jen. So what I mean by that is like, I think that's, you know, the advantage of having a Black Muslim woman director on a project and writer is that we'll be able to show you that inside space, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I think that would be something that I definitely see how your film Jen gives us the inside of that world.
Yeah, I'm always interested in like the interior world of people. And I think a lot of times it's just left out, you know, especially, you know, past films and TV we see when we have Black women, the little bit of Black Muslims we see, we just don't get to really go in depth into their mind as complex human beings. So just interested in that.
Okay, we'll get back to that because I would follow up with why is that, right? And I think I was on a panel with you once before, and you had mentioned about how you were in a room, I think on a show or something, and there was people just didn't know Muslims, right? They didn't know the Muslims character that they had, so you were there to beat that character up, right? To basically shape that character. So that's another thing that I enjoy about your work. So Muna, am I saying it right?
Yeah.
I am so trying to get this right. So what about for you? What were some of those, what inspired you in terms of images?
When I was younger, I didn't really think that filmmaking was an option for me. I initially thought that the kind of work I wanted to do was like to support or work with disenfranchised communities. And so I really hadn't really thought of filmmaking as a possibility, but when I definitely have been influenced by the kind of films that have already been spoken about. When it comes to Malcolm X, it was really great to read his book and then to also read his autobiography and then to also see that film. And as a first generation, like African, I was born in Somalia, like I was really kind of looking for what it meant to be a Black Muslim in this part of the world. Like it didn't really seem like I could look to my parents necessarily to explain what it meant to be a Black Muslim in North America. So I certainly was looking for like images in the media, in film and TV to see what that could be like. I often was influenced by like films in the 90s, by like books that I've read. And so I think after some time, I decided that filmmaking would definitely be a good thing for me to try out.
No, so let me ask you a question, because I was trying to figure this out about you through your bio, because it wasn't in there on the one I had. So are you from Canada? Did you grow up in Canada?
I grew up
Okay.
in Canada. Yeah.
So you don't have to say Malcolm X. Okay. So what
No, really,
Okay.
I don't have to say Malcolm X.
Okay.
The reality of growing up in Canada is that we're very much influenced by the United States. So
Okay.
when we were younger, there was very little that we were taught in our schools about the African Canadian narrative. And in fact, when I was doing research for my the last script that I was working on, I actually tried to find out information about African Americans who had lived in Canada and who had spent some time here. And so those were some of the earlier stories. But we were definitely influenced by American TV and American culture and Black culture. And it took quite a bit of time to figure out what like being African Canadian was, because it certainly wasn't out in the world in the same type of way. So.
And that's what I appreciate about having this panel with Black Muslim women, because I don't think people understand that we're a monolith. We're not a monolith, right? That there are many different voices, and how you will have to categorize yourself as Black, right? But there's also this conversation about, you know, like the complexity and the
Absolutely. I definitely agree. Like when I think about what it means in terms of like our role in the diaspora, or like what my particular point of view or perspective is in terms of like my version of being a Black Muslim, I definitely think that there is a lot of beauty in our diversity, certainly.
Someone just said proud Canadian here. So they just gave Canada a shout out. So Variety had a panel recently about women in Hollywood, and it talked about fighting to tell the story, or Black women in Hollywood and fighting to tell those stories. So Rashida Jones was on that panel, and she mentioned, there's somebody else shouting out people to, okay, sorry, I'm getting distracted with that. But Rashida Jones mentioned that we need to work radically to change the narrative of Black women in Hollywood. And I wanted to just kind of talk about that, because they're saying this was a panel about fighting to tell those stories about Black women. But I'm pitching this to the panel, but if we're fighting to tell stories about Black women, I'm assuming we're probably at war about telling stories about Black Muslim women. So does anybody want to talk about the unique challenges of being a creator, or someone who is a Black Muslim woman trying to get stories up probably about Black women, or maybe even Black Muslim women? And what are some of those unique challenges at this time? Trying to get those stories out. Samira, I know you're.
I think people, what I've encountered so far is that they just want you to stay in your lane, or the lane that they've assigned for you. They have really no interest in seeing the different shades that we come in. And they have no interest in embracing stories that they've never encountered, that I think an audience is incredibly hungry for. You know, I think our audience is quite starved to hear stories about them, by them. We don't really get that. And I think there's a lot of pushback when you don't fit the mold that they have set out for you. They say, you know, we will allow you into the door, maybe one at a time, one a year, one every few years, we'll let them through. But, you know, you have to fit a certain, you have to check some boxes. And if you don't check those boxes, they put up a lot of roadblocks for you, because we're not just, we have so many things against us. We're not just women, we're Black women. We're not just Black women, we're Muslim Black women, you know, right. Like it's like the trifecta of things that people aren't talking about right now. So I think that the barriers are really, they're really sturdy. And they really don't want you to come in. So you just have to kind of start launching grenades and say, you know, we're coming, whether you want us or not. We're not going to stop creating. We're not going to stop creating community amongst ourselves. If you're not going to do it, we'll do it ourselves.
Samir, I want to follow up too to this question because like your name, when I look at it, it's a very Islamic sounding name in terms of how it looks on the page. And I was looking at the different roles. First off, you're a great actress.
Oh, thank you.
I was like, oh my God, like I did not recognize you in all the things. I was like, oh my God, she looks different in every one. I was like, what race is she? No. But I wanted to ask you, like, do you find that maybe, you know, your name in some way, you've had some challenges? Or, I mean, I don't know if you even know if it's,
Well,
you know.
I've only a few have people sort of given me feedback about it. I don't think most people mention it other than that they can't pronounce it. But I was in a play early in my career and they had changed directors and the director hadn't, after we had all been cast. And so the director hadn't met us or looked at our photos or anything because it was very quick. And she came in and she was quite startled that I was not an Indian woman. She had created in her mind a whole narrative of how she was going to do this. Well, she was just basically going to exoticize the Indianness of what she thought I was. And then when she found out I was Black, she really had no idea what to do with that. So we just wound up doing it, you know, Much Ado About Nothing straight. And I got to play the character as written. Instead of having to jump through hoops or change who I am to be something. But that I don't really, I haven't really had a lot of people directly tell me anything about my name other than they think it's pretty.
Okay.
So that's good, actually. That's a nice thing. One less thing to have to contend with.
Okay. Nigella, do you want to say something or anybody else?
Yeah, I think, you know, just echoing what Samira is talking about. One of the reasons that we made Jen completely independently was because of those barriers, was because we knew how hard it would be to push through a film about a Black Muslim girl navigating identity, sexuality in a way that just wasn't the Hollywood. It's not a white gaze. It's not a Hollywood lens. It's really speaking to Black girls, Black women, Black Muslim women, Black people. And we just knew that there was no, you know, kind of template there for us to fit into. And so even when we were pitching the film to investors, you know, people were just kind of taken aback because they hadn't really come across a story like that ever. And there weren't a lot of kind of contemporary examples that they could pull from. So you just had a lot of people who, just because of that, wouldn't give the film or story a chance to live because they just don't have something that made over $1 million that's comparable to what we're trying to do. So I think for me, I just knew that I could tell the story completely in the way that I wanted to tell it by making an independent film and having control over the narrative rather than trying to go through. We did try some kind of like more formal studio routes that didn't work out, but I just knew that ultimately it would be an independent story, just because there was not a lot of foundation there for us to pull from, for people to get behind it in the way that we would want them to.
Okay, somebody asked the question, how was Jen distributed?
Jen was distributed. We premiered at South by Southwest, and Orion Classics picked up the film from there, and then it went. It just honestly, it wasn't a good distribution deal at all. We were given no marketing. We were just, no one, a lot of people didn't even know our film came out. We did all word of mouth and through good press, we got people to pay attention, but it was in some theaters and it's now on Amazon Prime, and that's where the majority of people watch it, is on online. But I think we're getting to a better place now where our stories are given the distribution and the marketing they deserve. But at that time and juncture, we just weren't really given a chance to have a good distribution deal. So,
well, I want to say something to you about that I enjoyed about watching your process. You're very open. Like you're also film critic. Like you write reviews about films, but you're also very transparent in your process. So there was a way that I, as a filmmaker myself, coming out with a film too, could see your process. You would be open about different things like the GoFundMe, I remember reading something you were talking about, what you just said about the industry kind of rejecting that narrative about Black Muslim women. And so it was just interesting to see, like, and I think to your credit and congratulations on like the documentation of Black Muslim woman gaze, right? But also Black Muslim woman filmmaking process, right? So to your credit, so thank you for that. And I think it'll be helpful for other Black Muslim women coming up. So Mona, you know the drill. I'm coming to you if you have an answer. So like, do you have something you want to add to that to what we were talking about?
What was the question again?
So mainly, I'm just talking about the war to make Black Muslim women stories. And I know you have a film, I think, and I might be getting it wrong, called Black Gold Muslima.
Yes, that's correct.
I saw the trailer for it. And what I saw was you pitching, is it existential?
Yeah, it's about a young Muslim woman who's a comedian and who's trying to figure out how to balance her identities. And the reason that I wanted to work on that project specifically is when I was in film school, my professor said to try to work on the project that scares you the most. And one of the things that worried me the most was specifically about representation. So I wanted to figure out how to balance what it means to be the identities of being a Black woman, a Black Muslim woman, an immigrant, and I wanted to do them in a way that was authentic and honest, but also in a way that was authentic and honest. So I didn't necessarily, but also respected my faith and also respected the variations of faith. And so I created a character that went on a journey and tried to kind of like, I let the character try to answer that question for me. And I learned quite a bit, like through writing that script about just even in terms of some of the feedback, some of the suggestions that people made was for me to like change some of the names to make it simpler so that like, so that it could be easily understood by a larger audience. So like, as I was going through some of the development on that script, some of the feedback that people gave or that they expected her to be in a hijab, and it's important to have Black Muslim women who are not in hijab and to find out what their stories are. And so I certainly think that there's lots of challenges when it comes to like representation. And for me, when I think about my audience, which is like Black people, Black Muslim women in specific, one of the concerns that I have is to try to create work that speaks to that audience and that can capture the variations of the way that people practice their faith. So one of the characters is an aunt who's like a model, and she doesn't really she doesn't wear hijab, and she didn't practice when she was younger. And so I try to just show that being Muslim isn't one very specific way. And I think that in the stories that we tell, that's what we're trying to do. I think that people are expecting a very specific look when they think of a Muslim person, and Black Muslim narratives. We need more of them so that we can start to understand that there's so many different ways to be Black and Muslim in this world.
It's kind of ridiculous though when you think about it, because like we've been around like the statistical data on Black Muslims in general, like from the very beginning, in terms of some people already know this, that Black Muslims were here when, even before the conversation with the Nation of Islam, but also with Black Muslim slaves, right? But I have a question about something that I heard you say, that people wanted you to shorten the names.
Like some of the feedback was that people wanted like simpler names, or like so you're trying to get feedback from like executives or like people who might be able to like while I was pitching my project, one of the suggestions was to simplify the name so that they would be easier for an audience or easier for like people. So of course I didn't do that, but like that's some of it. No, I did not simplify it.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that's like those, like, as you're trying to do this work of like just thinking of your audience and just thinking of honoring like these women, you have to also take into consideration all of these other voices that are not aligned with what you're doing and who have the power to make your projects happen. So
right. So maybe because that's not a question here, but I do want to kind of open that up, which is the conversation about like the notes, right? So the notes on that you're getting from executives possibly about your content that isn't, you know, because when we talk about like, who is this content for, right? You said first it was for Black people, right? And, or maybe you said Black Muslims, but it's interesting to hear that because it sounds like I think we talked about the white male gaze, right? But really, who are we shortening that for? Like Amber Ruffin did a really great bit about that recently on her show about Black women's names and like how some white people have a hard time saying those names. So, you know, I guess I'm opening that if anybody wants to add, but when we talk about audience, like, the idea of having to basically de-Muslim your project and maybe even de-Black your project to get it made, that is very, anybody want to add to that? Like, where do we draw the line?
I think it's, for me, I think just in my experience so far with writing, in the script that I've written after, it's about a Black Muslim American woman who is redefining her identity after a series of tragedies. And I included some, you know, Arabic words and things like that. And feedback was, you know, you should write this in the translation. So people know what you're saying, what this means. And I, you know, I'm okay with some of it, and some of it I didn't change because I think there's an instinct that will Google it.
Right.
You know, if you don't know it, you would, I mean, any word that you don't understand in a script, you're not going to understand every single word. People use, you know, words from the 1800s. You don't know what they're saying all the time. So you Google it and you look it up. Why do you have to not do any work? Do I have to really make it that easy for you? And I've also heard things, because I didn't make her a saint. She's very prickly, and I've definitely had pushback about that. I think that's unacceptable, especially because she's a Black Muslim woman, so they want her to be very palatable. And she's not, because she's going through stuff. And I think, you know, right now we're seeing a bit more with like Rami and Mahershala, who's out there doing amazing work, and they're allowed to sort of be anti-heroes sometimes, you know. And so I would like to see some women and some Black Muslim women just being real about their experience. And so I, you know, with that one, I did not take those notes because I wanted to lean into that. I think there's a purpose for that, and there's a time for that. I don't think we always have to be nice.
Okay. Well, yeah, women are expected to be nice, right?
Yeah.
And our characters are expected to be nice, and we're expected to wait and just be waiting for men. Somebody put in the chat, do we have the Muslim splain, right?
Yes.
Indeed. Nigella, did you want to add anything? Jen is great at that. Jen is Arabic.
Yeah. I was like, I'm just writing real people here. I don't, when I write Muslims, I don't say, oh, I'm gonna write this type of person. I'm writing a complete person, flawed, complex, intelligent, beautiful, makes mistakes, like all the elements are there. I do not believe in types. I don't believe in the good saint, the bad, I believe we are just people, and that all of my work is like that. Muslim characters, non-Muslim characters. And I think that's what made Jen, it really, a lot of people just love it and relate to it, because they're like, man, finally we can just see some Black women, some Black Muslims just being people. And it's refreshing. I think it's just refreshing to see someone reflected on screen that is like you, who's just figuring it out. And And so when I was writing Jen, I didn't have, like I said, we made it independently. So I did not have execs who were telling me, you know, you need to do this or that. And that was an asset. That was something that was beneficial for my process, to not have people over me telling me how to do things. But on the flip side, it's like, it's independent. So we don't have a lot of money. So we're going to have to really, really like try to make this work, shooting this film in 18 days for, you know, a very small amount of money. And so that's the kind of things you have to juggle. It's like, you want to have the control and that authorship and that authorship, but you have to see, oh, wow, I don't have a lot of money and I'm going to have to really figure this out. And for me, I will take that chance if I get to tell my story in the way I want to tell it, and not be, you know, have things, you know, being messed with, and, you know, people wanting me to change it in a way that doesn't fit the image and the audience that I'm serving. So that was really how I negotiated that.
I want to follow up real quick, and I'm gonna get to the questions. There's questions, lots of questions, so that's good that people are excited to talk. I just wanted to lift up the Summer character. I don't, you know, in her play, her you know, the way the Summer character and her mother, and the whole conversation of conversion, right? So we don't see that. So it's just assumed that we're Muslim born, right? Or not, right? That's the thing I would have answered, was like, when I say Muslim, everybody in the audience at home, they probably don't see any of us, right? Right? Muslim doesn't typically, film and television doesn't represent Muslim as Black Muslim women, right? But the Summer character and her mother and the conversion to Islam, I think that story, that idea of the conversion is I really appreciated having someone tell that story. So just anyway, just lifting up that you do that, or you did that. So what did you want?
Oh yeah, just, you know, I think it was important to show how people enter into a religion, into a spirituality. Both my parents were not Muslim at one time. And so I really had to do honor that journey that people go through, in terms of conversion and reversion to Islam.
Which is a different experience of mine, right? I'm born Muslim. So for me, it's like, I enjoy seeing someone take the handle of the conversion. That was good, really powerful. Okay, so just another question here, and then we'll get to audience questions really quick. So I think I saw some of you liked Sue's post on Facebook about the Dave Chappelle Netflix interview that he did, where he lifted up, where he talked about how Islam like brings him comfort and influences him. Do you all, if anybody feels comfortable, you can pass on this question, but does being Muslim, how does your faith shape you as an artist, or bring you comfort? Or bring you comfort? How does that, you know, play into the way you create? Or do you think about being a Muslim, or do you think about any of this when you? Anybody want to take that?
There's a quote that I saw Mahershala Ali share, which is like, "Oh Allah, guide us to our excellence," or "Oh Allah, guide me to my excellence." And it's like something that I think of often, or I try to affirm, because I think in the end, like, we do the best we can, and then the rest is up to Allah. Mm. Most of the work that I do, I try to think about, I just try to think about having people who look like me, or like people that I grew up with, or people that I know be represented. And most of the time that means that they're Muslim, and like they're like interesting, and they've got like layers. And so I just want to make sure that they are included. But most certainly, I think about Islam quite a bit. Like, my journey went from like wearing a hijab and being like super like very religious in that way, to like not wearing a hijab. And so I've had my own kind of journey, and so I want to make sure that yeah, so that's about it. Sorry.
So as other people answer, do you want to talk about, maybe that's a great response, how do you deal, does your faith help you deal with the microaggressions against Muslims, you know, because obviously there's a lot of some Islamophobia, but you know, does the faith help you? Or do you think about that when you're creating? Is there a way that you find solace in it?
I think for me, it leads me to believe that there's a certainty that like whatever Allah intends for me will happen, and that all I can do is try to create the best work and to have the best possible interactions with people. And since I know that in the end it's up to Allah, I think that really gives me the resilience to continue on. Like I've been working on one film for like 6 years, and I'm very much closer to where I want it to be. But like knowing that like my intention is to illuminate Muslims and to illuminate stories, and that like whatever Allah intends will happen, most certainly gives me the resilience to keep going regardless of what happens.
Okay, that's a great response. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted because somebody's texting a question about brainstorming ideas. Anybody else want to respond, or we'll go to other questions?
For me, I don't always write Muslim characters in everything that I write, but I do find I tend to sprinkle Islam in, even if it's not specifically a Muslim character, just because I think it's something you can't divorce yourself from. It's just in you. And so it comes out in the writing. But I think because we do live in an Islamophobic world, it has been tricky when I have written Muslim characters of trying to stop myself from pleasing every single Muslim who might have put their eyes on this thing. Because it's scary to say something that within our community might be something that we know, but you don't want to say anything negative because you don't want someone to take that as fact and run with it and take it out of context of what you're saying. So it's been an internal sort of struggle for me to just say, well, this is my story that I want to tell right now. It might be a different character who comes to me in a couple of years who wants to say something different. But right now, I think there are things that in the community, there is anti-Black racism that you do find sometimes. There is some, not everything is a utopia as well. And so it's just hard to navigate like what to say, what not to say.
Samir, I'm sorry to cut you off. You talking about in the Muslim community?
In the Muslim community, and also, because you want other people to watch this who aren't Muslim. You want a wide audience. You're telling something specific so that it can be universal. And sometimes I've been in things where, there has been some Islamophobia in the writing, and people have taken that as fact. And it's been very difficult for me to then be in that project because I'm like, but that's not true. That's not my experience of this thing, but maybe it's somebody else's experience, so you're kind of like, do you censor yourself or not? And I've decided not to censor myself, but it's scary to do that.
Nacha, I want to put you on the spot because I want to talk about, so piggyback off of Samira's conversation. So she's talking about, I don't know if I'm lifting up the wrong thing, but are you talking about like writing an imperfect character as a Muslim woman and the responsibility almost to present possibly perfection, feeling like you have to represent you have to maybe show a character that may or may not be authentic because you're feeling pressure. So Nadia, is there something you want to talk about with that in terms of like your summer character or just in general? Like you said something earlier about how you just think about your characters as people. You're not like approaching it.
Yeah, I'm a writer and director who's very deep into character. I go so deep into characters. I really get into their head and their mind and their world. And I think the more deep you go into character and character development, and going to the humanity of people, then the more that character won't come off as like a bad person or a negative stereotype or, you know, tarnishing the community, because the humanity, and I think that's a big thing with Islam, is just like humanity and love and peace and these things coming through. So when I made Jen, I made sure that all of those elements came through, that there's struggle, but there's so much love and there's so much color in life in this experience that Summer is going through, and she feels it too.
Right.
And so I thought it would be a disservice to her, to the character, to me, to the community, to hold back on the truth of what people go through, of what teenagers go through, of what, you know, Black women go through in life. And so for me, like I did have points where I was like, wow, I don't know, like when it was first doing screenings, I would get a little scared, because especially when I went home to Oakland, I did a big Oakland screening, and I was like, my dad's in the audience, my whole masjid is in the audience, and I had to have them love it. You know, if someone didn't like it, I was like, I might just try, but they loved it, and I didn't get any, you know, like there was no, I really didn't get really that much pushback on the film, not at all. And I just think it's because people see it's coming from a place of love, and it's, every character is a complex person. There's some characters who do things, they make a mistake or they do something that maybe is not the right thing, but there's a full circle moment where maybe they realize they shouldn't have done it. So I'm not just here to just put these types in here and just, oh, this is the bad guy, this is the pious woman. Like, these are fully realized people. And I think the more I can do that, I do that with every project, then the better, you know, people won't just get, you know, angry or think, oh, this is just, you know, being a bad representation for Muslims. So that's what I just try to do.
Right. So because we think about Hollywood's image of Muslims is basically usually flawed, and typically had been us Muslims as terrorists, and typically omitted Black Muslim women, right? So there's a way that there's a responsibility, but the responsibility, I think, at this point is really to yourself as the creator. I don't know if that, the creator of the content, to be authentic.
Yeah, it's like I just knew I couldn't, because when you make a film, it's there for life. And it's like, it's gonna be with you for life. So I'm like, I know I can't live my life having my first feature not be what is true to me and true to what I know of the community I come from and people that I know and the world. So I just had to do that. And it's a risk. Art is a risk. You never know how it's gonna, what people will say. But, you know, with Jen, I'm so grateful to God that people really, you know, found their self in it in some way. So
great. So, okay, there are a couple of questions from the audience. Some I've already asked. Somebody wanted to know about exercises that you do as a writer, or maybe you do some as a director for creating content, like some of your pro tips on how you create. Anybody want to take that? Nobody wants to take that question. That's from the audience. I didn't create that question. So y'all gotta. Nobody. Okay. Let me think. So nobody has a process. What's your process? I mean, I know I could pretty much say most of your themes from what I saw, but is there a process to your creating your theme? Are you, like, for me, if I get stuck, I have to travel. Like, if I get stuck, I have to go outside of, like, I live in Inglewood, so I gotta go somewhere and just, you know, I like to eavesdrop on conversations. Mona, I know you're a comedian, so some of your process, you already said, is you go on stage, right? Yeah, you workshop jokes.
Yeah, I workshopped, like, the people, like, the dialogue was good, but I needed to work on the jokes, so I did stand up. And so it's a really good way for me to try to figure out comedic timing. And it was also a really wonderful way to get to understand the world of comedy in a way that makes the script richer. So I definitely do that. I'll go for walks. I listen to audiobooks that are connected to like things that are interesting to me or meaningful. I'll speak to my grandmother, and who always has a bunch of stories. I'll listen to lots of people. I'll also, I watch old films and like films from Somalia, like old kind of like riwayats and stories. And I actually look a lot towards African storytelling as well. Like I'm interested in like stories in the diaspora and stories in Africa, and like what our mythology is, and the rhythm of storytelling. And so I try to watch all those things, listen to a bunch of different things, and I know that they find their way in the work in the end.
I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see that film.
Thank you.
Samir, how about you? Because I know you do theater. I know I've directed one play, and I know it's probably, to me, theater may be harder than film directing. The process for you.
It's completely, I think the process of acting is the same. But I think theater is they're very different disciplines. You have to be worried about very different things, but artistically, you know, I'll listen to music. I just want to open up my imagination as much as possible. When I'm creating a character, I need to get the lines in as soon as possible. I find that whenever I'm stuck on a line, it usually means I don't know this person yet.
That's a good one.
And so, you know, when I'm going through the lines, I start to ingest their history and their story a little bit deeper and deeper each time I go through them. So I read the script a lot. And then I do just, you know, artsy exercises.
Like what?
I do like Suzuki. And because I find that like doing something really physical, and it's kind of a jarring type of exercise, you don't have time to think. And when I don't have time to think, it really sort of frees me up. And then a lot of creative impulses start coming in to my head. Writing is a little different though. I right now I'm trying to juggle being an actor and now being a writer. That's a little tricky because acting is definitely my priority. But I really enjoy writing. So I can't do both at the same time, I'm finding. So if there are moments where I'm acting, I can only act. I can't do any writing. And then when I have downtime from acting, that's when I can, I think because I invest fully in the creative process of either one, that I can't sort of divide my attention that way just yet. I'd love to figure out a system for that, but right now I can't. And for writing, most of my stuff comes to me in dreams. So I try to be, you know, really open and pay attention and have my phone next to my bed at all times so I can jot down the notes. And then, you know, a couple months later, I'll start to put some connective tissue between the scenes that have come to me. And then all of a sudden I'll have something that I like that's starting to take shape.
Very good. Nigella, I want to ask you about your directing process. You mentioned about your writing process. I saw a little bit of a short you did that was a mermaid, like I think a Black mermaid in there. Was that?
Yes, that was my thesis film.
So can you talk maybe about your directing process? Because I noticed the bean pie close-ups, the very detailed, very much showing us aesthetic, Black Muslim aesthetic. What some of your directing process? I know you did directed Insecure and Queen Sugar, but how do you approach, because it's one of the questions, how do you approach, what's your process?
Yeah, my directing process is really, a lot of it is tied to my writing. So a lot of the details, especially in Jen, like that's all in the script. And also I'm a poet. I write poetry. I've been, doing creative writing and poetry since I was a young girl. And a lot of the source material for Jen for that script came from poems that I wrote about my own life and about, being a Black Muslim girl, and everything that I was going through was then channeled into Summer and into this script that became Jen. So I really have just like a really close relationship to the text and to kind of trying to honor that, especially, scripts that I write. But it's also a lot about world building, like what world am I trying to build? And what are the details and the images and the visual design that is going to help me to convey that world? And that is with my films, but also when I enter a TV show, they have a whole world set up already. And so it's about how am I going to add my voice to this world? How am I going to create a world? So it's a lot about the writing. It's about, I'm really into like scene study. So it's a lot about going scene by scene and really knowing what scenes are about, like what I'm trying to say, what characters want. This is like theater stuff, but I went to Cal Arts where theater was like a big foundation of their curriculum for directing. So we did a lot of scene study. And so I really don't like to go into directing scenes or anything without fully like marking up the scene to know exactly what is it about, what the characters want, like what's the conflict, like just rudimentary stuff. But it really helps me to know that so I can fully invest in the actors and give them like everything they need to be successful in their character. So I just feel like I do the work. I will do all the work to fully kind of get into the world of the character, into the world of the film, into the scene, and then get on set and be able to perform. But it's a lot of like, before getting on set, doing the work to, have the answers for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, very good. I'm going to go to these questions. I'm actually going to have to open them. Let's see. Okay, someone asked, I'd be interested to hear whether the panelists think there are greater opportunities for Black Muslim women in film or television. Does one medium seem more welcoming than the other for Black Muslim stories? Anybody want to take that?
I think I can just say, I'm actually right now on a TV shoot. I'm going to be directing an episode that I wrote for an Apple show, but I found the TV space. I think for just as a Black Muslim woman and working, like getting employment, I have found the TV space to be somewhere where I can have a life and kind of make money and live and survive, as opposed to the film space. It can be hard to make a living just, making films. Like there's people who do it, but I think that it can, in the beginning it's hard. So I would say the TV space there's more and more opportunities for women, Black women, Black Muslim women to get in there, direct, write. I see that in my experience.
I mean, and can we also, since we're a couple of days away from the election and we're also in the middle of a pandemic, I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention that maybe some of those opportunities have come from the response to the administration and the cracking of skulls with BLM, right? Like this is an interesting time. We should talk about that, right? Like there's does anybody think that the BLM's, response and, the pandemic has kind of made, because this is definitely a different time for my experience. I see a lot more opportunities, and I would agree with the television conversation. I think features in general right now are just hard. It's hard to get up, right? The whole industry right now is pretty much, kind of frozen, right? But then there's a few things getting out. But anybody else want to add to that? That what's happening in the zeitgeist, what's going on has helped or maybe hurt your stories? I mean, we have a president right now who literally put a Muslim ban up when he first, within 90 days of, or I don't know, within a few months of being elected.
Yeah.
Do you think that these stories, the response to getting even this panel, like the idea that we're having a whole panel with just Black Muslim women, I don't know, does anybody feel like the times have helped or hurt their career?
I think that the racial pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement have certainly allowed people to, it's provided a lot more exposure, and people are definitely interested and wanting to hear from Black Muslims. Like, I think that, like is often done in North America, there's challenges in Black communities, and many communities benefit as a result of like the resiliency and work that's being done. And so I think most definitely there are opportunities, and I think it's a great time to be, I think that it's a great time to be able to try to tell stories.
Yeah. And we know that BLM movement was founded by Black women, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and just on the TV question, I wanted to say too that when I worked as a Muslim consultant on Corner, the TV show season 2, which is going to be on CW, I specifically was able to help craft or support the creation of a Black Muslim character named Noor. And so in that case, they the creators of the TV show invited me, called me into the writer's room and asked me questions about how to make that character feel specific to a culture. And I think that more and more so people are starting to recognize that you have to include, if you want to create a Black Muslim character, you've got to include Black Muslims and speak to them and ask them for advice to make sure that it's authentic. So I thought that was a really great experience, and it was also a very good storyline. So I just wanted to add that in terms of this TV.
very good.
And I would like to add that, yeah, I had the same experience on a TV show that I wrote for, the one I'm here directing. I had an opportunity to help create a Black Muslim character in the show. And just, it was a great experience to be able to be in the room and have that type of input. And nobody really tried to challenge me, but I think that also came from people's just lack of awareness, or they just didn't really know a lot about Islam or Muslims. So they kind of, a lot of times would look at me as like the expert, which I didn't like sometimes. I don't like people, I'm not the expert, I don't think I'm an expert on Islam. And so it was a good experience, but sometimes it was a little overwhelming to be that person who always had to speak for, a community.
Well, we won't tell anybody you're not the expert. We'll keep it our secret.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like it comes to a point where it's like, these are people too, right? This is a person too. So it's like, certain questions I didn't understand, why they're asking that.
That's the burden, right? The Black Muslim burden in some way. Okay, so I think there was another question I saw. Okay, there was another question I saw about any projects that you all are excited about working on in the future that you want to lift up at this point. Assuming that Hollywood doesn't do what it's done in the past and like exploit and then move on. Are there projects that you want to at this time discuss that you're excited about? That was one of the questions on audience questions. Any future projects, or is everything a secret? I know everything's always a secret. Like, you can't tell this. Anybody?
I'm working. I have a new podcast called Young East African Girl, and I'm also worked on a book proposal for a collection of essays about the connections between, the connections or kinship between Pan-African communities, and it's called You Are My Other Self. So those are 2 projects that I'm working on, and I'm also have my feature film.
And say the name of your feature film and your, go ahead.
Black Gold Muslima. Yeah. So Black Gold Muslima, because of the pandemic, I started to work on the collection of essays because I wanted to find out like how I can contribute or like what stories I can tell. And so it felt like a way for me to feel like I was actively creating something that could be useful and also working out my feelings around like the time that we're all existing in.
Love it. And you can now use the word Muslima. Just so you know, I made a film called Muslima's Guide to Marriage. And I think I didn't create the word, of course, but I'm just telling you, don't let anybody shorten it to
No, I wouldn't.
Moo or Mo.
No, absolutely not. I have like 6 Muslim names, so we're good.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk about future projects? I know, Nigella, you mentioned you're directing. I think that's the project with, is Reggie on the EP of that? Reggie Bythewood?
Yes, Swagger is the show that's going to be coming out on Apple. We're currently in production, and I'm about to go in production on my episode in about a week. I'm in prep right now. So, look out for that. And then I have some films in development right now. I do have one film that is entitled Noor for the main character's name. And it's a love story. I've been developing that since 2010. And yeah, it's a high stakes love story set in Crown Heights, Brooklyn.
Love
and
it.
It's something that, I'd never seen before on screen. So I'm really excited to get that out into the world one day.
Great. Samira, I know you don't do the internet. I know you don't do social media. I'm just messing with you.
I do it sometimes and I don't do it. I have an off and on relationship with it.
No, but any projects you want to mention or anything you want to lift up?
Right now I'm just working on a couple of pilots. My brother and I are adapting his novel One Blood into a pilot, and then I have another one that I'm doing on my own. I wrote a children's book recently that just kind of came out of nowhere.
Wow.
That I also kind of am looking at possibly making it into a series. So that's what I'm doing right now.
So if there's nothing else to say, I will just say thank you all for being here. I know that there are going to maybe some other people going to come on, but I want to say thank you for this conversation. This is like a dream come true to have my Muslimas here, letting people know. Because I know when I get in the room, people are always like, oh, you're the only one, right? And then it's like, no, there'll be others, right? So I'm excited that we had this conversation, but I'm excited to see you. And even though, most of you, it sounds like everybody's doing very well, but just know that, I guess we lean into our faith that things will continue to go great, right? I want to thank Muslim Public Affairs Council. I want to thank Women in Film for this excellent panel. This was literally a dream come true. And I want to thank the City of West Hollywood Public Affairs Council and the audience for joining us for the Black Muslim Women panel, which is basically uplifting Black Muslim women's stories and Black Muslim women creators. We truly can see that Black Muslim women's lives matter. And hopefully we will be the ones creating those stories, continue to create those stories and others.
This has been
Assalamu
absolutely fabulous. I have loved it. And I just want to share, I'm not going to call anybody out, but one of the audience members sent me a private message during the conversation to just say that she and her friend were watching this. Her friend is an Afro-Latino Muslim. And she's like, I can't tell you what a panel like this means to me, just seeing other Black Muslim women who are creatives on screen talking about how they're actually doing it. They're actually making it. They're not letting their art stay within themselves, but they're sharing it. It meant so much to them. So I just want to thank you for those messages that we've been receiving. I appreciate so much the time that you've shared with us. I can't, thank you enough for this. Thank you to the West Hollywood Arts Commission. Thank you to Impact's Hollywood Bureau and to Sue Beatty for helping us put this panel together. Although this is my first time meeting so many of you, during the course of putting this panel together, I hope it's not the last time. Women in Film needs your energy, it needs your brilliance, it needs your creativity, your talent. All of you, please come back and share. You have so much to give to the community, and I hope the community can continue to uplift your work. So on that note, I want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Women in Film Speaker Series. Thank you again to our panelists, to our amazing moderator, Professor Amina Bakir Abdul-Jabbar, and we will see you soon. Thank you.